From Wembley heartbreaks to constant injuries at Manchester United, and now the burden of wearing the famous number 7 shirt, Mason Mount's career has felt more like a test of resilience than a fairy tale. He's lost finals, missed decisive moments, and spent long spells on the sidelines just when he looked ready to shine. For some fans, it all feels like a curse. The Wembley Curse, the Injury Curse, even the number 7 curse at Old Trafford. But is Mason Mount truly cursed, or is this just football's brutal reality? Today we dig into the story. The Wembley Curse. Wembley is supposed to be the place where English players write their names into history. For Mason Mount, it became the stage of heartbreak, over and over again. It began in 2019 with Derby County, 90 minutes from the Premier League. Straight at steer. But Aston Villa crushed the dream in the Championship playoff final. At Chelsea, the pattern continued. The 2020 FA Cup final, defeat to Arsenal. The 2021 FA Cup final, defeat to Leicester. International football offered no escape. In 2021, England's Euro 2020 final against Italy ended in penalty shootout pain at Wembley. Mount was part of the team, but not part of the glory. Then came 2022, a year that cemented the so-called curse. First, the Carabao Cup final against Liverpool ended in a penalty defeat. Then, in the FA Cup final that same season, Mount himself stepped up in the shootout and missed. His effort was saved. Liverpool won, and the weight of Wembley failure grew even heavier. By 2022, Mount had played in 6 Wembley finals and lost them all. Fans and commentators began to talk not just of bad luck, but of a Wembley curse hanging over him. And yet, in 2024, under the arch once again, something finally changed. Manchester United faced Manchester City in the FA Cup final, and this time it was Mount who walked away a winner. A 2-1 victory, a medal around his neck, and proof that curses, at least in football, don't last forever. 7 Wembley finals, 6 defeats, 1 glorious win. For Mason Mount, the story of Wembley is no longer only about heartbreak, it's also about resilience, and finally, redemption. The number 7 curse at Manchester United. When Mason Mount arrived at Manchester United in the summer of 2023, there was already pressure on his shoulders. A big transfer fee, a new league chapter, and the expectation to deliver. But the decision to hand him the number 7 shirt, that took things to another level entirely. The number 7 at United isn't just a number, it's a legacy. It's George Best's dazzling crowds in the 60s and 70s. It's Eric Cantona, the king, redefining swagger in the 90s. It's David Beckham, bending free kicks into the top corner. And it's Cristiano Ronaldo, turning the shirt into a global icon. Wearing number 7 at Old Trafford isn't an honour alone, it's a burden of history. But since Ronaldo's first departure in 2009, the shirt has become something else entirely. Instead of inspiring greatness, it seems to drain it. Memphis Depay arrived with swagger, left with regret. Di Maria was United's record signing, a one-season disaster. Alexis Sanchez looked unstoppable at Arsenal, but in red number 7, he looked like a shadow of himself. Even Ronaldo's second spell ended in controversy, his legacy tarnished by falling out with the club. So when Mount was unveiled with the number 7 shirt, many fans raised eyebrows. Was it too soon? Was it too heavy a responsibility for a player already trying to win over a divided fanbase? To some, it felt less like a fresh start and more like walking straight into a storm. On the pitch, Mount's United career stumbled almost immediately, with injuries halting his momentum. Every absence, every quiet performance only added fuel to the whispers of the number 7 curse. Instead of lifting him, the shirt seemed to weigh him down. And yet, the irony is this: Mason Mount never asked for the number, it was given to him. But in football, perception often matters more than reality. And once again, that word returned. Cursed. Not just by Wembley, not just by injuries, but by the very number on his back. The Injury Saga at Manchester United. If the Wembley curse shaped Mason Mount's reputation in finals, then injuries have shaped his life at Manchester United. From the moment he stepped through the doors at Carrington, Mount's biggest opponent hasn't been a rival midfielder. It's been his own body. The warning signs were already there in his final months at Chelsea. Mount had been struggling with a pelvic issue that eventually required surgery in 2023. It was a painful end to his Chelsea chapter, and, in many ways, the beginning of the struggles that would follow him to Old Trafford. His first season at United, 2023-24, promised a fresh start. Instead, it became a stop-start nightmare. Within weeks, he was sidelined with a hamstring injury. Just as he worked his way back, another setback arrived. A calf problem that ruled him out for months. For a player meant to inject energy, creativity, and pressing intensity into the team, Mount spent more time in the treatment room than on the pitch. The frustration wasn't just his. Fans who had been skeptical about his price tag began to question whether he would ever justify the investment. Critics labelled him a sick note, comparing his situation to other United players whose careers were defined more by medical updates than memorable performances. Phil Jones, Donny van de Beek, even Anthony Martial, the whispers of a curse grew louder, and the cycle hasn't really stopped. As the 2024-25 season unfolded, and now into 2025-26, Mount's story has been the same. Brief returns, flashes of quality, then another setback. Just when it seems he's ready to build momentum, his body breaks down again. For a player still only 26 years old, it feels cruelly premature to be talking about his career in the language of what could have been. But this is the harsh truth. At Manchester United, availability is as important as ability. And for Mason Mount, injuries have robbed him of rhythm, consistency, and the chance to properly stake his claim. Instead of being remembered for match-winning moments, he's become a case study in frustration. Another layer to the so-called curse. Signs of redemption. And yet, even in the middle of all the frustration, Mason Mount has shown why Manchester United wanted him in the first place. Because when he does get onto the pitch, the quality is there. Sharp movement, clever positioning, and that knack for arriving in the right place at the right time. The breakthrough came in Europe. After months of setbacks and questions, Mount scored his first goals for Manchester United. And not just in any game, but in the Europa League semi-final against Athletic Club. Under the lights, with pressure at its peak, Mount delivered a brace. It was the kind of performance that reminded everyone. This isn't a player defined only by injury reports, but a footballer capable of stepping up in big moments. The momentum carried into the Premier League. Against Brentford, Mount produced his best domestic display in a United shirt so far, scoring once, assisting another. It was the complete performance fans had been waiting for. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't about curses and injuries, but about what he could become if given a consistent run of games. And that's the key. At just 26, Mount is still entering what should be the prime of his career. He remains versatile, able to operate as an attacking midfielder, a box-to-box runner, or even drifting wide. When fit, his energy and tactical intelligence add balance to a side often accused of lacking structure. For all the narratives of curses and bad luck, these flashes of form hint at something else: resilience. Mason Mount hasn't given up, and when the chances come, he's showing glimpses of a player determined to rewrite the story. Maybe, just maybe, the curse isn't as permanent as it seems. Is he really cursed? So, is Mason Mount actually cursed? Or is this just football's tendency to exaggerate patterns into stories? On the surface, the evidence is damning. 7 Wembley finals, 6 defeats, a missed penalty under the arch, injuries that never seem to end, and the weight of the number 7 shirt at Manchester United, a shirt that seems to swallow up more players than it elevates. To the casual observer, it all adds up to something more than coincidence. But dig deeper, and the picture looks less like a curse and more like the brutal reality of modern football. Wembley heartbreaks. Plenty of great players have lost finals, injury setbacks. Even the most elite names have endured years in the physiotherapist's room. Think of Ilkay Gundogan early in his career, or Arjen Robben, who was labelled injury-prone before becoming one of the best wingers of his generation. For some, these struggles are stepping stones rather than stop signs. And then there's the number 7 shirt, Yes, it has a strange history of disappointment in the post-Ronaldo years. But was it really a curse for Michael Owen when he lifted the League Cup with it? Or for Ronaldo himself when he returned and delivered Champions League goals? Sometimes it's not the number, but the timing, the system, or the circumstances around the player. In truth, Mason Mount isn't cursed. He's a footballer living through a difficult chapter in a career that still has time to be rewritten. His injuries, his finals, his shirt number, they're part of his story, but they don't have to be the ending. And maybe that's what makes his journey compelling. If he can overcome all of this, the so-called curse becomes the backdrop to a redemption arc. From repeated Wembley heartbreaks to the burden of United's number 7 shirt, from endless injuries to rare flashes of brilliance, Mason Mount's story has carried the hallmarks of a curse. But in 2024, under the arch, he finally lifted the FA Cup with Manchester United. For the first time in his career, the so-called Wembley Curse was broken. And yet, the other shadows remain. The pressure of the number 7 shirt still looms large. The injuries still interrupt his rhythm. The question isn't whether Mount is cursed forever. It's whether that breakthrough at Wembley was the first step in rewriting the rest of the story. At 26 years old, he still has time to turn the narrative from one of frustration into one of redemption. Perhaps one day, we'll look back on the Wembley win not as an exception, but as the turning point. But what do you think? Has Mason Mount truly shaken off the curse, or are his struggles far from over? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.